I'm very happy to be talking today with Brian Fleming. Brian had a long and storied career in law enforcement, and he's done a lot of thinking and a lot of helping in the stage of retirement for law enforcement professionals. So Brian, I was hoping that you could sort of review sort of who you are in your career and introduce yourself to everybody.
Okay, yeah, Rob. Oh, thanks, Rich. So, briefly, I don't want to get into a long, sordid history, but I can highlight some of the things that are important to what I do today. And I became a police officer in 1983. And back then, police officers and firefighters and other civil servants were more or less respected, and I just can't imagine what guys and girls are going through today. But actually, 2 weeks on the job, I found out very quickly that we weren't very much respected. But when we were brand new, we were on walking beats. It was an election year, and I was 2 weeks on the job, and I got an argument with a cab driver. He went up and he complained about me, and it was downhill after that. You know what I mean? But I went from there walking beats, and they must have seen something they didn't like, because they sent me out to the boundaries of the city. Now, all the old timers would love that, but I'm a new young cop, and they gave me a walking beat around a graveyard, and I was pissed because I'm the world's greatest crime fighter. How could they do this to me? You know what I mean? No delusions of grandeur. But I stayed there for a while, and then things are done politically pretty everywhere. And I landed on the motorcycle / SWAT unit with a year on the job, and I had arrived. I mean, I'm driving a brand new '83 Harley, getting paid to do it, and really not having much to do. And we had some calls, but we didn't have a lot. So I was fine, but there was something that was really eating at me inside. And it was the fact was I was doing drugs when I was drinking. And I developed a habit, and I would not in any way, shape, or form admit that I was an alcoholic, but obviously the drugs were a problem. And I told myself 1,000 times I was never going to do it. I'm going to stop. And one night I came home, and it was a beautiful sunny day like it is today. And I said to myself, you did it again. You did it again. And I said, well, there's only one thing I can do. And I remember taking out my .38 and putting it to my head with my finger on the trigger, and wanting to die. I will never forget that black, hopeless place that I was. And, I often think of a friend of mine who committed suicide. The difference between having worked as a range master later in my career, that gun that I had was a 12-pound trigger. The one that he had was a 3-pound trigger. So all he had to do was breathe on that. He couldn't hesitate at all. He was gone, So, I got that desperation, and I said, I was convinced that this is there's nothing else I can do. I've tried, or I thought I tried. And I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. And I thought of my mother, and maybe I didn't have the courage to pull the trigger. I don't know, but I put it down. I went to bed, and I continued on my merry way. And about a month later, I ended up overdosing, nearly dying from the overdose. And I'll never forget getting wheeled into the emergency room. I come out of a blackout, and the guy says, "You know who you are?" And I kind of looked around, and I saw the tan ceramic tiles. I said, "Yeah, I think so." But one thing I'll never forget as long as I live was the sense of peace that I felt at that moment, because even though I didn't know what it was, I knew it was over. And from that point, I was set to rehab, and of course, the drug usage leaked out, but it didn't leak out through an official channel. And long story short, I ended up getting terminated probably a couple of months later. So I was only 2.5 years on the job, and I got fired. And devastating. End of my career. Whether I deserved it or not to be on that job, it's irrelevant, because it was everything to me. But in Boston, they had the first what they called the stress unit back there. It was the first employee assistance program for police officers in the United States, and was started in 1974. Eddie Donovan was one of the first directors who was great at doing this stuff. And I went down there, and even though I had been fired, they allowed me to go to meetings. And, you know, for purposes of this, I break my anonymity and say I'm still in Alcoholics Anonymous today, 35 years later, because of what happened. And it's been a blessing. So they let me stay connected. I was going through the whole legal process, and always going to meetings, doing what I was supposed to do. And about 3 years into it, and I had been working construction, so I found out what real work was like. Didn't like it at all. You know what I mean? Carrying boxes and digging ditches and all that stuff. So in July of '89, actually it was on my mother's birthday, I had come to the decision that, well, I'm not going to get this thing back. It's over. I'm done. And a Supreme Court decision in Massachusetts come out with another officer who's not a friend of mine, is a friend of mine, Mike Carney. They had done the same thing to him, went on a fishing expedition, and they ruled that it was illegal, and both of us were reinstated to the job in July of '89. And after dicking around for 6 months, they put me in what we know as B2, which is it was the highest crime district in the city, and I was on the booking desk. And besides being in a gray out in the academy, I was just putting the busiest stuff in the city. Like today, I think they have 40 murders a year. And we had 152 that year. Most of them came through that desk. So someone else got in trouble. They took my seat. I moved out to the front desk, and then next night I was out with a guy whose father was in AA, and he understood me correctly, and he's a walking law, but perfect partner. And it was like being a rookie all over again. And so it was like being a rookie all over again. And then I had been down there like 2.5 years, so I decided I'm going back to the motorcycle unit. That's where I belong. And I kind of forced my way back there. And guess what? I was miserable. And it wasn't because of the drinking. I mean, everybody in the unit back then, everybody drank, and I didn't. And that wasn't the part, but it was the negativity. I used to call it the SEER character defect. You know, everybody's like, in a SWAT team, whether you come from across the country, you automatically start hitting them with these verbal jabs that are sharp, razor sharp, and nothing's sacred. It just isn't where I was want to be. So I ended up transferring out, and I studied, and I ended up getting a sergeant's promotion. And for someone who has ADD and never really had much to do with studying, it was a miracle, because out of 444 people, 33 got promoted. I was number 33. And after a year and on midnights, and that's a whole other thing. Some guys like it. I felt like I was drinking again. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Couldn't work out. And out of desperation, I took a day job back in the motorcycle SWAT team, and I ended up there 7 years as a supervisor, and different job, sober, you know. And once I had enough of the John Wayne stuff and all the politics, but I had a lot of great times. I have pictures in my office at home with presidents, vice presidents, heads of state, things that most police in their career never get a chance to. But anyway, after that, I went to the firing range, and it was an awesome job. You know, no pressure, complete opposite of the SWAT team. And I thought I was going to stay there till I retired. Then that partner that I had back in Roxbury knew my history, and the head of the peer support unit was leaving. And he kind of talked me into it for like 6 months to take that job. And I guess I was supposed to be there. And in 2012, we started a program I'll talk about in a little while. It's an anonymous confidential quiz that we allow cops to take, and we get them help without anybody knowing who they are. And the following year, we had the Boston Marathon bombing. And as head of the peer support unit, I oversaw all the mental health interventions, the police, not only in our department, but others. And I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to do that sober and not, have much of a problem, and everything ran well. New York came up and helped us. And then there was a political change, a new mayor come in, new commissioner, and I ended up in the basement of the academy in an office doing nothing. And I had a huge resentment, you know. But after about a month, I said, you know what? No one's looking for me. They don't want me to do anything. There's a gym across the hall. So I went in, I ate, I worked out, and I went home for a year. And when I found out I could retire, that's what I did. And when I retired, I told the commissioner, I said, anybody, you know, that's going to retire, this is a great slide into retirement. You should send everybody up here who wants to go into retirement. But it was a great job. And then when I left, I started my own company training police departments on these issues that no one else was doing. And now I've kind of moved away from it because everybody's doing it. You know, it's everywhere. And I just frankly don't want the competition. I'd like to do it. When I'm called, I do it. Basically today, what I'm doing today is helping people, you know, get help. They still call me from time to time because they know my background and the connections I've made over the years. So it's not really, when money gets involved, just isn't good for me. So, but that's where I am today. And here I am sitting in my trailer down in Cape Cod, loving life.
You and I got introduced through Amanda Coleman, otherwise known as the Irish Angel. And I had done some work with Amanda on the topic of retirement, police retirement, law enforcement retirement generally. And one of the things that really struck me and stayed with me and I couldn't get out of my head is when I learned that, well, everybody knows, or most people know, that PTSD, depression, and suicide is very, very problematic in the law enforcement world. And the rates per capita are much higher than most other industries and most other career paths. That after retirement, it doesn't go away. And as a matter of fact, the suicide rate, while it's hard to find exact numbers on this, seems almost higher that first year after retirement than prior to retirement. So when you have guys calling you and so on to get help, what do you see the issues are in leading up towards retirement and post-retirement for law enforcement?
Well, one of the things is, you know, that our divorce rate's like 75 or 80%. And I think that is due in part to people working so many hours and abandoning their family, essentially trying to give them all the toys. You know, I saw it happen once with a friend of mine who was the salt of the earth, didn't drink, didn't screw around and anything. And his wife just said, "You can't be married anymore." And that's a simple case, but most of them are involved with divorce, custody, paying for houses, financial burden. So, you know, they get locked into that. If I was talking to the rookies today, the first thing I'd say is start saving money and never take it out. Because the guys who are the most secure these days are the guys with a $1 or $2 million in the bank. No, they never have to work again. You know. Now I wasn't smart enough to do that, but I did it with enough so that I'm comfortable. And actually, I always tell people I'd be happier living under a bridge than going back to that job. You know. So, I mean, it was a great job, but the negativity and the stresses and so on. But one of the things I would love to see happen, and it was suggested to me by someone in contract negotiations in a city out in the middle of the state, that, and a lot of unions are afraid of this, but having a mental health check every year for every police officer, not for ones you think that have the problem. And it has to be independent, and it has to be from a law enforcement perspective. I think we have to normalize mental health checks, just like we go get our heart checked, we go to the dentist, we get our hearing. That has to be part of our care. And I see a lot of, I mean, I was at a symposium at NYPD a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of good stuff being discussed. I don't know how much of it actually came back, because what I've done in our quiz and some other things we've done, it just doesn't seem to filter down to the first line officer. It's like the supervisors are afraid to talk about it. And so that's a whole systemic thing that we have to change. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no. So, and you know, to tie the last couple of things together, you'd mentioned that you see officers working, especially these younger officers working high numbers of hours, that can lead to marital problems. That can lead to divorces. That can lead to other financial problems. And are you seeing that as one of the main paths towards the issues that we see in law enforcement of depression, suicides, post-retirement suicides? Is that kind of a main path in your mind, or is there other paths that are more critical?
There's other paths, and I think the exposure to different traumas over the life of your career. What I would like to see is, on the retirement end, a career debrief.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you have a clinician who's law enforcement, whether it takes 1 session or 10 sessions, go through your whole career, and you're going to have stuff come up. It's going to have an emotional reaction, stuff that you've been stuffing down all these years. And that's going to be like a cleansing kind of thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
going to, what it does is opens up the door to getting help, because now you don't have to worry about losing your job. You're retired. You don't have to worry about what people think. You know what I mean? So it's something that really ought to be looked at heavily.
So when I look at retirement in law enforcement, one of the things that surprises me, first of all, retirement in law enforcement is a little different than retirement in a lot of other careers. First, it tends to happen earlier, right? So you have the guys that will retire at the age of 50 or 52 or even in their late 40s, and then go on to other careers, or sometimes retire and do freelancing or whatnot. So in a lot of other careers, you're retiring much later in life. Most careers don't have the pension aspect of it and so on. So it happens earlier. It happens in an environment where, as an officer, you are part of a brotherhood. And that's very, very important in a major aspect of the career. That tends not to happen in a lot of other careers. Accountants tend not to retire and hang out with, at professional meetings and so on. You had mentioned when you retired, you were a little bit more fortunate because you had a network through AA. You probably had friendships through that. But one of the things that seems to surprise me about the retirement in law enforcement is it happens early, and when you're out, it seems like you're out. There tends not to be. You've gone from a huge brotherhood and a major network to good luck. And talk a little bit about that. Do you see that, and does that cause problems?
Well, I think when you're talking about earlier, you're probably talking about agencies that aren't too much like Boston. Boston, you have to be 55 and have 32 years on the job. Now, I came on when I was 28, and I retired when I was 61. So, I mean, I come on in life, but there are people who retire at 55, and then you have the people that retire at 65. They're doing a detail on their last day.
Yeah.
Those are the people I worry about, because
Yeah.
the last thing I wanted to do was put on a uniform again when I knew I was done. And I personally, and I laugh, friends of mine say the same thing. They say, "Oh, the last thing I want to do is hang with a bunch of cops, drinking or doing whatever they're doing," because that's another life to me. I mean, I have many friends that are cops today, and I consider them good friends. But I don't think I really hung around with cops much when I was on the job. I have a separate life. And I think that probably one of the reasons I've been married 30 years this Monday, is that, I try to keep it separate, so I don't know. I've been lucky.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that the notion, which I think was a great notion, of having a debrief at the end of a career, also having mental health checks throughout the career, which are anonymous, sort of non-threatening, standard, just like getting your eyes checked and so on. I think which are great ideas. Are there other things that you think that law enforcement should be providing or supporting the professionals with as they get close to retirement, but before they actually retire? And the reason I ask you that is, in a lot of other industries and a lot of other career paths, there is some kind of a lead up to retirement. When it's coming, there is a certain level of support that happens. what's needed? What's missing in the law enforcement world along those lines?
I, when I retired, I asked someone who's a friend of mine. Actually, they worked for me under one of my units called the Family Assistance Unit. And what they did, they knew all the ins and outs of dropping off equipment, going to City Hall, get the papers done. So they would take you on a day-long ride to go through and take care of that. And basically from there, it would be up to your friends to have a time or, but I mean, maybe if he was around, you'd go up and see the commissioner. But there's a lot of political differences too. You know, I don't want to see him. You know, that's the end of
Right.
him. I'm out of here. I think that it should be treated a little more carefully. And they may be doing this now. It's been 5 years since I've been out. I know they've done some great stuff with suicide. They actually put a memorial inside of Boston Police headquarters for officers who had committed suicide. So that was a big step in the right direction. But as far as treating you special or leading up to a retirement, that's something I think what they look at from a business perspective, and I'm not talking about Boston. Every place, it looks at you, well, you're an asset that's leaving. We got to take care of these guys that are just coming on,
Yeah.
are on, and so on. So their resources are going to them. Maybe that's changed since like I said, but yeah, it really should be. And they have like a dinner every year where they are recognized, you know, by the unions, et cetera, and someone from headquarters will be there. So that's about it, you know.
Yeah.
But maybe it's changed. I hope it has.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised only because, you know, now in the world that we live in now, we have municipal budget constraints all over the place. So it's probably even more constrained in that regard.
The other thing is with it's the atmosphere today. I mean, I look back to like before I got on when I was a kid in the 60s, the riots and so on. But now the disdain and hatred for police is just unbelievable. So that's going to wear on them. And
Yeah,
look at New York. I think their retirements are up like 87% this week,
yeah,
this year. So that says an awful lot. When young people, there were young people I know on my job that actually, with 10 years or so, they said, screw this, I'm going to go become a carpenter or a house builder or something. You never saw that before.
right.
So people, I don't think I could have ever made that choice. I'd be too afraid that I'd lose everything. And but the people who do it, I give them kudos. So it's a lot of courage.
If I was a police officer and I was looking at retiring in a year or a year and a half, knowing what you've gone through and what's out there, what advice would you have for me?
The first thing to look at is finances to make sure you can do it. How much you're going to make. Are you eligible for Social Security when you get it? Because we don't pay into it, or we didn't when I was there, but I had worked a job before, so I get a little thing. You know, but I think that's the thing that bothers us the most. Do we have enough? And to
Yeah,
the detriment, some people who have enough, and I talked to one the other day, he has more than enough, and he's still afraid to step out. And I said, look, you know how unhappy you are. I mean, it's crazy that you're putting up with this stuff. The negativity, the mistreatment, the way everything's so political, and it's a horrible existence in some instances. And this guy could walk away tomorrow, but he has second thoughts because he doesn't know if he has enough. And I mean, I put that guy that was doing details or working overtime on his last day. You know, what does that tell you? It tells you that
yeah,
he could drop dead the next day. And I've
right.
seen that happen. I've seen people this past couple of years drop dead just before retirement. You know why? They're working so much, they're not taking care of themselves. The best shape you'll ever be in, they tell you, is in the academy, because that's all you do is work out. But if you maintain some semblance, you know, I look in Boston, we have a system called details where they can work on the street details and they get paid by the vendor, and then they get overtime and the work. From in the first 5 years, you can see someone from the shape they were in the academy. 5 years later, it looks like a completely different person.
Hmm.
The uniform had faded from the sun. They're overweight. They're tired. They're beat up. I mean, that takes an enormous toll.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, we when I was talking to Amanda about this, we've seen the same types of things of, and a lot of the guys that say, well, I'm not sure I have enough, money. Um, it seems like they do. It's not, they might be using that as an excuse to say I can't retire yet. It's really something else. There's something else behind it. And it seems like, the fear of the unknown, the lack of kind of having a good plan for what am I going to do Monday morning when I wake up, the lack of having a social network. When you have a built-in social network, not everybody has that. It seems like
Yeah,
these things often
yeah.
are what's really behind the I'm not ready yet.
It's a fear of change. It's the fear of
Yeah.
change. You've been doing something for 25, 30, 35 years, and all of a sudden it's not going to be there. Even though everything looks like it's in your favor, still hesitant to do that because what if?